The 2015 edition of Secret Wars is the storyline that will serve as the foundation for Avengers 6 and the grand conclusion of Marvel's Multiverse Saga in the MCU. It is the tale that unveils the incursions and the disappearance of countless realities across the multiverse. Many incursions had already taken place during an arc called Time Runs Out. By the beginning of Secret Wars, only two realities remained in existence: Earth 616, Marvel's main universe, and Earth 1610, better known as the Ultimate Universe. These two realities inevitably collide in one final incursion. Only a handful of heroes and villains survive. From the ashes of this collapse, the multiverse is stitched together into a single patchwork planet, Battleworld. And at its center, Dr. Doom seizes the throne of godhood itself, reshaping reality and ruling as its supreme deity. Doom commands Doctor Strange, Molecule Man, and an entire legion of Thor variants, enforcing order upon his new dominion. His empire is divided into baronies ruled by vassals, among them Mr. Sinister, Apocalypse, Madeline Pryor, and many more. Yet among the survivors of the final incursion are those who remember how the multiverse once was. They alone bear the knowledge of the truth, and they must rise against God Emperor Doom and his vast army to restore reality as it was meant to be. This is an unmissable saga that unites Marvel's greatest heroes and villains on the battlefield. At the beginning of Chapter 1, we see total darkness. Dr. Doom, Doctor Strange, and the Molecule Man were surrounded by an infinite void when a glow struck their faces. Victor Von Doom says that we, humans, know much more than we can comprehend, and yet we know very little, almost nothing. He comments that people believe that the light we see when we die is overloaded electricity running through the brain, a synaptic death. But in reality, it isn't that. According to Doom, the bright and blinding light we see near death is God. The three appear on a floating platform in the middle of that void, facing a bright purple light that seemed like a crack in the very fabric of reality. That light was, in fact, a group known as the Beyonders, a race of omnipotent beings living in a dimension outside the multiverse. The Beyonders say they are the Beyond. They are dreamers and destroyers. All reality is nothing but their will. Then these entities ask who dares stand before the Beyonders. Dr. Doom answers and introduces himself. At that moment, almost all universes of the Marvel Multiverse had already disappeared, thanks to the incursions that took place in the Time Runs Out arc, the prelude to Secret Wars. Only two realities were left in the entire multiverse, and they were about to collide in one final incursion. They were Earth 616 and Earth 1610. It's worth noting that Earth 616 is the main Marvel Comics universe and Earth 1610 is the Ultimate Universe, the reality of origin for Miles Morales, for example. The story moves to New York City on Earth 1610, with the incursion about to happen. Several helicarriers fly around the Triskelion, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s headquarters in that reality. Nick Fury and Hawkeye were trying to figure out how much time was left until the end of that universe. They spoke via video call with that reality's Reed Richards, known as the Maker. Reed explains that only this universe and one more remain. Now the two universes were about to undergo an incursion, which would probably begin within minutes, but he had no way of knowing how long it would last since it depended on many variables. It also depended on how efficient they would be in eliminating the other universe. Fury realizes then that they had to destroy the other universe for theirs to continue existing. The reality that won the battle would survive in the end. The Maker says he is absolutely certain about what he's saying. He used all the technology he had to witness the collapse of the multiverse and monitored all the incursions up to that point. He tells Nick Fury that it was time to save the world one last time, and then hangs up the call. Clint Barton asks if they could trust Reed Richards, and Fury says no. The S.H.I.E.L.D. director explains that the Maker was a megalomaniac genius, that he was 1,000 years old, and that he had destroyed most of Europe in moments. They could not trust him. But the problem was, Reed wasn't wrong at that moment. What he said was true. At that point, it was kill or be killed. The winning universe of the final incursion would survive at the end of everything. They had no choice. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s duty was to protect that universe. Fury says it was time to prepare for battle with all the strength they had. Meanwhile, the Maker talks with the artificial intelligence called the City, a futuristic, sentient city he had built himself. The city warns that the Triskelion had sent every ship they had. Reed then says that while S.H.I.E.L.D. fought the other universe, they would work hard on what really mattered. He asks how much time they had left to complete what they wanted to do. The city says it was impossible to know. At first, the incursions could last up to 8 hours, but due to the compression of space-time, the last incursions usually lasted less than an hour. At that moment, the Cabal, a group that was a sort of dark version of the Illuminati, appears for a meeting. It was composed of characters who had survived from different realities. Thanos was one of the members of the Cabal from the main reality, Earth 616. The Mad Titan asks Reed why he lied to Fury and Barton. They had run every possible simulation and test. There was no way to save anything. There was no victory to be had. The Maker says he told a story that gave hope because they had to believe they had a chance. If they believed in that, they would fight harder, and that would be more entertaining for the Cabal to watch. Besides, they needed to buy time to finish their objective. Thanos disagrees and says there is no honor in trying to run from death. People should know their time was up. At the incursion point between the two worlds, in New York City of Earth 616, the battle was about to begin. The heroes of the main reality noticed the arrival of several helicarriers from the Ultimate Universe and moved forward to try to stop the invasion. Characters like Mighty Thor, Spider-Man, Hulk, Vision, Black Bolt, and many others rushed toward the ships. S.H.I.E.L.D. from Earth 1610 begins bombing the city. Spider-Man returns to the ground to help with rescue efforts, telling people to leave the streets and seek shelter. At the same time, in the Baxter Building, Earth 616, Reed Richards worked alongside the Fantastic Four and Black Panther, preparing a ship that might survive the end of both universes. This ship had been built as soon as they discovered the incursions. It had capacity for about 60 people, and their intention was to shelter scientists to try to recreate the multiverse and humanity after the end of everything. The ship was almost ready to depart, but they still needed extremely important cargo that was being brought by Black Widow and Spider-Woman. Sue Storm calls to check on their status. Natasha Romanoff explains they still needed 5 minutes to reach the Baxter Building because they were delayed by attacks from the other universe. They had to take detours to avoid bombs. The cargo was the world's brightest scientists who would help with their survival project. Among the brilliant minds were Hank McCoy, the Beast, and Amadeus Cho. Natasha and Jessica Drew had spent the last few hours separating families. It had been very tense. 2 scientists even gave up and decided to stay in that universe, but most agreed to go. Mr. Fantastic replies that the 2 who quit were chemistry and physics specialists, but they were only substitutes, so it wasn't a major issue. Reed tells them to begin the ship's launch sequence. Chala places Eden Fesai, the mutant known as Manifold, into a kind of machine. He was a mutant with the power to tear space-time and link one point of the universe to another. Black Panther says things could happen in 2 ways. If everything went as planned, they would launch the ship and Manifold would teleport into it afterward. But if everything went wrong, Manifold would have the responsibility of saving the day. Eden then says he understands perfectly, that he is ready, and tells them to turn on the machine. The battle between the heroes of both realities raged on with full force. The Iron Man of the Ultimate Universe told Nick Fury that they were outnumbered when it came to superpowered individuals, but their fleet of helicarriers wasn't facing much opposition. Fury replied that they no longer had time or windows of opportunity. They had to unleash their full strength. Stark had to win. Captain Marvel and War Machine prepared to fight against Ultimate Iron Man, when Stark unleashed a devastating weapon against the heroes, a satellite-like armor known as Iron Man 6. Buildings began to collapse under the blasts of this armor, and Spider-Man did everything he could to save more civilians on the streets. Luke Cage and Iron Fist rushed to pull people out of the rubble. Meanwhile, Peter Quill ordered Drax and Rocket to focus their attacks on Iron Man's weapon hovering above the battlefield. Their mission was to bring that satellite down. At the same time, the mighty Thor Jane Foster and Storm combined their powers for a joint assault. They summoned the Fury of the Skies, unleashing lightning upon the helicarriers, destroying one of the ships in a massive explosion. Sam Wilson, the Captain America, and Bobby Drake, the X-Men's Iceman, noticed that Sentinels had appeared in the midst of the battle. Sam asked if those robots were allies or enemies. Iceman replied that it was hard to tell, since they were Sentinels of the Nation X, controlled by Cyclops, and no one could guess what he was planning. Scott ordered the Sentinels to keep everyone distracted and tied up for as long as possible. He still needed more time. Earth 616 began to turn the tide. Captain Marvel crushed Iron Man in combat, while Drax destroyed Stark's weapon. Ultimate Iron Man reported to Nick Fury that they were being pushed back. The satellite was gone. Groot, Drax, and Rocket cheered after destroying Tony Stark's weapon, while Carol Danvers warned Iron Man that it was time for him to call in reinforcements. Otherwise, the battle would be lost for them. At the same time, Doc Green, as Hulk was known then, She-Hulk, Nightcrawler, Colossus, and a robot named Pod devised a plan of attack. The idea was to launch Hulk at one of the ships, but they were too far, making the shot almost impossible. Colossus then told She-Hulk not to worry. He had plenty of experience with this kind of strike. With all his strength, Colossus hurled Doc Green straight toward the Triskelion of the Ultimate Universe. Tony Stark spoke with Nick Fury, admitting they had lost 80% of their helicarriers and were at a clear disadvantage. They desperately needed reinforcements. Fury began to respond that he would call them, but before finishing the sentence, a massive explosion shook headquarters. Doc Green, She-Hulk, and Pod had landed at the Triskelion, launched by Colossus. Despite the tremendous blast, the building still stood. Nightcrawler teleported Colossus to the site as well. They were impressed by the resilience of the structure, but the mission was clear: keep attacking until the building was completely destroyed. Clint Barton realized they had lost communication with the soldiers fighting at the Incursion site. Fury then called the Maker, confessing that he hated to admit it, but they had failed. They were losing the war, and now it was time to unleash the world-destroying weapon Richards had built, and hoped this strategy would succeed. Colossus, She-Hulk, and Doc Green tore down the Triskelion Tower, while Nick Fury urged the Maker to finish the job. Richards explained to Fury that he had not truly failed. Unfortunately, this outcome had been inevitable from the very beginning. Fury's only role had been to buy them time to prepare the weapon. That was always how it was meant to end. Fury had bought just enough time. Now the Maker would fire the weapon and reveal what he would build upon the ruins of these two universes. After the Triskelion fell, Nightcrawler noticed that the bubble at the site of the Incursions was beginning to crack open. In truth, it was a dome, a temporal shell created by the Maker to buy them more time. Namor the Submariner, a member of the Cabal and of Earth 616, declared that apparently the Maker hadn't acted swiftly enough, and that he was a disappointment in two worlds. The Prince of Atlantis pressed Richards to act, ordering him to do something. Reed answered the city, declaring that they had reshaped space and time to forge a perfect society. Now was the moment to reveal the secrets hidden within the dome. It was time to unleash the ultimate weapon of judgment, and with it, the group known as the Children of Tomorrow. From the cracks of the dome emerged countless futuristic ships, to the shock of Miles Morales, the Spider-Man of Earth 1610, who was standing atop the structure at the very moment the bubble began to open. Miles asked himself what the hell was happening. The heroes of Universe 616 realized that more ships were approaching. Medusa warned everyone to brace for a second wave of attack. One of the ships struck Black Bolt with full force, while Inferno, another Inhuman, barely escaped the blast. Iceman wondered who, or what, these beings were. Sam Wilson replied that he had no idea, but he had the feeling they were about to find out. Meanwhile, Wilson Fisk gathered several villains to watch the end of the world. Since they were all going to die anyway, they planned to celebrate the greatest failure of their enemies' lives, with drinks in hand. He called on Bullseye, Norman Osborn, Scorpion, Sandman, and the Absorbing Man together. They watched the battle unfold on television screens, toasting to the end of everything. Suddenly, the Punisher appeared in the room where the villains drank. Frank Castle told them that when a person dies, they can't take any of their possessions with them, which meant he had to figure out what to do with all the bullets left in the gun he carried. In the skies above New York, the ship carrying the scientists came under heavy attack. Black Widow contacted Sue Storm, telling her that, unfortunately, they wouldn't make it in time. Natasha apologized, saying that the Fantastic Four were on their own for this mission. The ship carrying Black Widow, Jessica Drew, and the scientists was completely destroyed. Sue Storm was overwhelmed with despair as she realized they had lost the Resurrection team. Everyone on board the ship died instantly. Chala told Manifold that it was time for Plan B. Everything had gone wrong. Now Eden had to activate the machine and use his powers to find the survivors they needed, the ones who could ensure there would be some kind of future. The Black Panther warned that it was going to hurt, and Manifold gave the order to power the machine. A blinding light flared as the machine activated. At that moment, the Sentinels detected that their perimeter would be breached within 1 minute. They alerted Scott Summers, but Cyclops replied that 1 minute was enough. Scott took hold of a phoenix egg ready to hatch and absorbed the phoenix force into himself. Cyclops rose into the skies, blazing with cosmic fire, declaring that this power was love. Meanwhile, the Guardians of the Galaxy fought desperately. Drax muttered that he hated Earth, just as Rocket was struck by a searing red blast. His chest was pierced through, and Rocket fell, dead in battle. Gamora was stricken with grief over Rocket's death. She also mentioned Groot, who had apparently fallen shortly before. Suddenly, Peter Quill was engulfed in a yellow light and vanished. Surrounded by enemies, Gamora and Drax wondered what had just happened to Star-Lord. Jane Foster was struck by the same yellow light and began to fade, to Storm's horror. Spider-Man also succumbed to the same fate. Carol Danvers was still locked in combat with Ultimate Iron Man. Tony Stark seized the moment to flirt, asking her out once it was all over. Carol was about to tell him to shut up when she too was consumed by the mysterious yellow light. Reed Richards declared that their time had run out. Mr. Fantastic urged Black Panther to let Manifold go, but T'Challa explained that Eden had insisted they leave without him. The mutant still believed it might work. He would keep searching. Black Panther confirmed with Manifold if he was sure about staying behind, and Eden replied yes. The mutant then commanded the others to leave immediately, before it was too late. The lifeboat launched, escaping from the Baxter building and from the colliding realities, as the world burned in flames. Elsewhere, the Maker and Thanos exchanged words. Reed Richards of the Ultimate Universe said that in the end, they had learned something important that day. Thanos asked what the end of the universe had taught him. The Maker replied that some things simply refused to die. Cyclops blazed across the sky with the full might of the Phoenix Force. Scott declared that an idea can never truly be killed. Some things always return, resurrected, or reborn in new forms. Cyclops too was struck by the yellow light and shone with blinding brilliance. That light was in truth Manifold's power, transporting select heroes to the Fantastic Four's lifeboat. Scott Summers appeared inside alongside Spider-Man, the mighty Thor, Captain Marvel, and Peter Quill. They arrived at a chamber where the Thing stood, carrying Franklin and Valeria Richards, the children of Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman. Everyone aboard would be among the very few survivors of the end of the multiverse. T'Challa noticed the Earth's surface itself beginning to fracture. This was all they could save. There was no more time to bring anyone else aboard. Reed Richards ordered everyone on the ship to fasten their seatbelts. The Human Torch and the Thing helped the young members of the Future Foundation prepare for the journey. Mr. Fantastic asked if it would work, and Black Panther replied that it would, but only just. Peter Quill nervously asked if it was normal for the ship to shake that violently, and Carol Danvers admitted it didn't seem like a good sign. Reed and T'Challa piloted the vessel, desperately trying to keep everyone alive. Mr. Fantastic explained that the shields were holding, for now. They had to reach the central point of the incursion. It was their best chance to survive. The two realities were on the verge of colliding completely, vanishing into nothingness. Lightning surged across both universes. One of the blasts from the collision struck the lifeboat, tearing off a section of the ship. T'Challa panicked. The hull had been breached. Though the shields were still keeping most of the vessel intact, the detached section was precisely where Franklin, Valeria, Sue Storm, the Thing, the Human Torch, and the young Future Foundation members were. The Invisible Woman strained with her powers, holding the torn fragment of the ship together. Mr. Fantastic declared that his wife was the strongest, most resilient person he knew. The effort would be monumental, but she could prevent the destruction of that section. She had to. Reed urged T'Challa to deactivate the shields in that sector. He would pull his family back into the ship. Black Panther warned that the forces at work were insane. Reed would only have seconds to fish his family back when the shields dropped, or everything would be lost. If he hesitated, the entire lifeboat would be destroyed. Reed swore he could do it. T'Challa began the countdown. In 5 seconds, the shield would go down. But he warned again. If Reed took too long, he would be forced to reactivate it. or the whole ship would be obliterated. Mr. Fantastic shouted for Susan to hold on. The Thing and the Human Torch were tense, praying it would work. Suddenly, at the very last second of the countdown, the Invisible Woman's expression shifted to one of utter panic. Black Panther told Reed that it was time, and Mr. Fantastic began stretching his arm toward the section of the ship where the other members of the Fantastic Four were trapped. Just as he was about to reach his family, Sue Storm's powers faltered. The fragment of the ship holding them collapsed, and in an instant, they were all gone. Reed Richards cried out in despair. Carol Danvers realized it was already too late and ordered Black Panther to raise the shields again. Reed continued to reach for his family, even after they had vanished, when the shields were restored. The lifeboat sailed through the void as the two universes collided and detonated into oblivion. Reed Richards confessed that he had spent his entire life searching for the perfect person to complete him. When he found Sue Storm, he believed he would never love anything as much as he loved her. But when their children were born, he realized how foolish that thought had been, because he loved them more than anything in existence. And in one single instant, he had lost everything. Everyone aboard had lost absolutely everything. He said he had always held on to hope for a better tomorrow, for a brighter future. But now, even hope itself was gone. And so, the last two universes of the multiverse vanished completely, as a blinding light consumed everything, leaving nothing behind. Within that white brilliance appeared the face of Dr. Doom. Then, after the light, only total darkness remained. And Reed Richards concluded, saying that now he had no hope, and he believed in nothing anymore. This is the end of the first chapter. Chapter 2 begins with a young Thor trying to lift Mjolnir, without success, while others watch. He fails, and another variant, even younger, steps forward to try next. Meanwhile, one of the elder Thors explains why this ritual was important. Lifting Mjolnir was more than a test. For those who succeeded, it was an awakening. The second youth manages to lift Mjolnir and celebrates, while lightning strikes the place where the hammer had rested. The Thor explaining the ritual was one of the oldest variants there. He says that before his birth, there were legends telling of a sky filled with stars, like a sea of lights. There was so much brightness that the difference between day and night was almost non-existent. Now, however, there were but a handful of stars left. He says that the All-Father had been taking the stars from the sky, one by one, to forge their hammers. Each hammer had the same purpose, the preservation of justice. That ritual was being witnessed by an entire army of Thors, who together were known as the Thor Corps, the defenders of law in that universe. Like the hammers themselves, each Thor had a purpose. They were the law. After the ritual, the elder Thor commands everyone to kneel, for God was watching. And the duty of the Thor Corps was to preserve this God's peace until the end of time. All of them bow before a gigantic version of Dr. Doom's mask. The ritual was taking place in Doomguard, one of the regions of Battleworld from where the Thor Corps operated. Various members of the Thor Corps begin explaining their role to the recruit, including Beta Ray Bill and even Storm, the goddess of thunder from Earth 904. Ororo Monroe tells the young one to stand firm, for he would now undergo a transformation that might be heavy to bear. The youth asks what kind of changes those would be, and the elder Thor answers, physical and mental changes necessary for him to become one of God's hammers. Beta Ray Bill asks where the recruit comes from, and he replies that he was born in the region of High Avalon. Bill says it was an allied kingdom, and that, being from there, the recruit had likely studied much and knew well the history of that world. The elder Thor then asks the recruit to entertain the others of the Corps by recounting the history of the universe. The young Thor explains, once there was nothing, and then there was everything. God Doom created light and the entirety of the universe. In this world, Victor Von Doom was known as the God Emperor Doom, the creator of all reality. Dr. Doom had forged Earth, the firmament, and then began dividing the world into realms. The boundaries of the realms were strictly defined, and few beings were ever authorized to cross from one realm to another. The recruit reveals this was his very first time leaving the kingdom of his birth, just to undergo the ritual. The elder Thor explains that this was common. Traveling from realm to realm was usually discouraged, and anyone wishing to do so needed permission from the Baron ruling that land. And there was a clear reason for it. Not every realm was as peaceful as High Avalon. The two arrive at the top of Doomguard, a massive floating fortress from where the Thor Corps watched over the other realms and prevented the inhabitants of that universe from breaking the laws imposed by Dr. Doom. The Elder Thor continues his explanation. He says many realms, perhaps most of them, often tried to rebel and soon discovered the crushing weight of the Thor Corps' hammers. He asks the youth if he wishes to please the God Emperor, and the recruit answers yes. There were many sinners in that world, and it was time to bring justice. Meanwhile, in the realm of Utopolis, Minister Alexander Power arrives to investigate a recent earthquake. With him is the team known as the Foundation. Some Moloids living in the region say they had found something, but they knew they needed experts to understand what it was. They hadn't even known anything was buried beneath their land until the earthquake opened a crater. Dragon Man, another member of the Foundation, explains that it had not been an earthquake. Minister Powers, Dragon Man, and Bentley 23, another member of the Foundation, enter a kind of lake and cross into a place where gravity was reversed, almost like another reality. The three begin to float upside down, with the vast universe stretching beneath their feet. Dragon Man explains that he knew it wasn't an earthquake because he had been studying and mapping every seismic activity in the realms of that universe. Bentley 23 comments that some people were obsessed with contradictory theories about the origin of the universe. Dragon Man urges everyone to look at what lay before them. Now they had megatons of evidence that this world was not a natural creation, but rather a patchwork of other worlds. He is immediately interrupted by Alex Powers. The minister says what Dragon Man was trying to explain is that the evidence did not point to an earthquake. One of the Moloids then asks what had happened. Alex explains that the story of the earthquake had likely been fabricated so as not to frighten the people of Utopolis. They would panic if they discovered that a Hulk was on the loose. Bentley agrees, saying it could only have been a Hulk that caused it, and Hulks were the worst. Dragon Man then discovers something that catches his attention. He says the object before them had a subatomic structure forged with some exotic material. He is stunned and calls the minister to help him. Alex then orders the Moloids to dig and extract the object. As they dig deeper, they uncover a massive ship buried beneath the land of Utopolis. Back in Doomguard, the Elder Thor was leading the young recruit to his first mission. He explains that their world stretched as far as the Great Ocean in the Northern Hemisphere and to the Deadlands in the south. Doomguard was the seat of the Thor Corps, which had jurisdiction over every realm in existence. To the west of Doomguard lay Doomstadt, the castle of Dr. Doom himself, the god and king of all that is. At that moment, the two were flying over High Avalon, the realm from which the recruit hailed. The Elder Thor explains that Baron James Braddock was the great commander of High Avalon, and even he now awaited the Thors to deliver divine justice. The recruit says he had only seen Baron Braddock once, and he seemed far above common men. The Elder Thor replies that to ordinary citizens, a baron looked like a king, just as to the barons, the king looked like a god. For some, that was comforting. For others, not so much. Many followed the light of the god Emperor Doom. Others denied him, living in disgrace. But most lived somewhere in between. This was the natural state of man, conflicting beliefs setting men against each other, realms against realms. As the two Thors approach, they see an enormous pink structure looming ahead. It was Bar Sinister, one of the realms of Battleworld ruled by Nathaniel Essex, the Mr. Sinister of Earth 21919. The Elder Thor explains that many people in that world forgot their true functions and origins. They denied their own station and began aspiring to become something greater, barons and kings. This, he said, was a disease the Thor Corps existed to eradicate. They enter the bar and find Mr. Sinister seated on a throne, already grumbling about the arrival of the law. The Thors declare that Sinister was being summoned to Dr. Doom's castle to answer for the crime of discord. The villain feigns ignorance, claiming they had the wrong man. Thor responds that he was certain this was the right man, and Sinister was free to resist if he wished. Nathaniel Essex asks if the sentence would be carried out that very day, should he be found guilty. Thor explains that the sentencing would indeed take place, and that the High Court itself would be present to witness the judgment. Sinister replies that since there would be an audience, he would, of course, give them a show. The young Thor then draws runes upon the ground, symbols that would carry them straight to Doomstadt. A bolt of lightning strikes the three of them, and they vanish. Their destination, the castle of Victor Von Doom. Galactus, wreathed in flames, stood guard over the fortress like a sentinel. The castle itself, like Doom's throne, rested upon the world tree of Norse mythology, Yggdrasil. The High Court awaited the trial of Mr. Sinister. Thor delivers Sinister as ordered, and the Sheriff of Agamotto, Dr. Strange, announces that the judgment will begin. Stephen Strange declares that he is Doom's right hand, and that it is his duty to preside over this trial. He states they had evidence that Mr. Sinister had been smuggling, and had secretly and illegally aligned himself with Hyperion, the Baron of Utopolis, in opposition to High Avalon and Baron Braddock. Sinister scoffs, calling the charge ridiculous, pointing out that an entire ocean separated their realms, and claiming he had no interest in petty games of intrigue. Hyperion himself then appears behind Sinister for the trial. Captain Britain intervenes, declaring that High Avalon knew Sinister had hired iron pirates to violate trade treaties between the realms. Sinister denies everything, saying it was all lies, and even if it were true, Braddock would never be able to prove it. The young Thor asks why such formality was necessary, and the Elder explains that within their own borders, barons had total autonomy over their realms. But when disputes arose between realms, only the High Court could pass judgment. Other barons were present to witness the trial. Khonshu, the Egyptian goddess of Moon Night, stood as Baroness of the realm of Egyptia. The Elder Thor further explains that some disputes ended in alliances, while others cost barons their very thrones. Such was the fate of the former Baroness Madeline Pryor, the Goblin Queen, who had lost Limbo to her own husband, Baron Summers, but still represented him at court, accompanied by Sim, the purple demon, in her service. Sebastian Shaw and Celine Gallio, the Black Queen of the Hellfire Club, were also in attendance, though they were not barons. The Elder Thor explains to the recruit that some realms had even been conquered in these disputes. For instance, the three horsemen of Apocalypse, Holocaust, Abyss, and Mikhail Rasputin each once ruled their own realm, but now all of them knelt before Baron Apocalypse himself. Stephen Strange adds that Sinister also faced charges of defamation, among others. After reviewing the case, the Sheriff of Agamotto declares Sinister guilty, ordering him to pay restitution to High Avalon, in gold or in territory. Nathaniel Essex refuses, and Dr. Strange grows furious. But Sinister declares that as a Baron of Doom, he had the right to resolve the matter in the arena through combat. Braddock could refuse, but if he did, all charges would be dismissed, and Baron Sinister would walk free. Stephen Strange confirms to James Braddock that such was indeed the law of this world. Essex asks whether Braddock would accept, or if he considered himself above the law of God. James Braddock prepared himself for battle, but Sinister had not challenged him. Instead, Essex had called out Brian Braddock, James's younger brother. The young man readied himself for combat, and James warned him to be careful. Mr. Sinister was far more than he appeared to be. The Thor Corps took their places around the arena. Mr. Sinister remarks that he could see the young Braddock possessed the strength to raise a castle, and that he was curious. He advanced to begin the fight. With a single strike, Braddock tears Sinister's head from his shoulders, celebrating as if the victory were already his. The crowd watching the battle celebrates Brian Braddock's victory, but Baron Maestro, ruler of the realm of Dystopia, declares that defeating Sinister would not be so simple. James Braddock warns his brother to be careful. On the ground, Sinister's severed head speaks, saying his curiosity had already been satisfied. His body, still without a head, strikes Braddock with full force, knocking the young man down. Then, Nathaniel Essex takes his head and places it back in its place. Mr. Sinister prepares to deliver the final blow and kill Brian, to the despair of the House of High Avalon. But before he can strike, the attack is halted by none other than the God Emperor Doom. Victor Von Doom commands all to kneel at once, and without hesitation, they obey. Sinister, Sheriff Strange, the Thor Corps, all fall to their knees before the Emperor's throne. Doom declares that he cares nothing for these childish quarrels, but he has just saved young Braddock's life, and for that, the boy should be grateful. Doom reveals that High Avalon was the realm that granted access to the Silent Chambers, a place where sinners and thieves gathered to plot against his throne. Brian admits he had heard of such a place. Doom continues, saying that every traitor captured within the Silent Chambers, when forced to confess, always spoke a single name, Braddock. He commands Brian to reveal the location of the Silent Chambers. On his knees, in shock, the young man begs forgiveness, insisting he does not know. Doom grows furious, declaring that if Brian did not even know the whereabouts of a citadel within his own realm, then he was utterly useless. Victor Von Doom raises the threat of killing the young Braddock, but James intervenes. He declares that his brother has nothing to do with it, that the traitors were speaking of him. Doctor Strange then proclaims that Baron Braddock is guilty and must be imprisoned. But Doom slams his hand down upon the throne, silencing the sheriff. The God Emperor declares that a Baron who betrayed him cannot be allowed to continue existing. Doom prepares to eradicate the entire royal family of High Avalon, until Sue Storm, known in this universe as Susan Von Doom, pleads with him for mercy. The Emperor heeds his wife's words. Instead, Doom promotes Brian to the rank of Baron, ordering him to serve the throne better than his brother did. He decrees that Baron Sinister will be publicly whipped. And as for James Braddock, Doom commands the Thor Corps to remove him from his sight. James thanks the Emperor for his mercy, but Doom responds that he has mercy only for the innocent. James would find no such mercy. He would be sent to the shield. A bolt of lightning crashes down in the arena, carrying the Thors and James Braddock away from the castle. Doom departs, and Susan asks their daughter if she will accompany them. Valeria Von Doom answers that she will go later. First, she must speak with the sheriff. Valeria explains to Doctor Strange that the two of them represented the conflicting ideologies of Doom himself. Strange was the law, the faith, the Emperor's right hand. She, however, was the leader of the group known as the Foundation, representing science and discovery, the Emperor's left hand. In the past, the two factions had acted independently, often clashing. But this time, she insists, they must stand united. For Minister Powers had made a discovery of equal importance to both law and science. Their discovery, she explains, would likely be deemed impossible by both factions, perhaps even heresy. They had found an object structurally unlike anything ever known. Carbon dating of the vessel revealed that the material was far older than the very creation of the universe itself. Strange orders her to be silent at once. If true, this revelation would ignite a schism. He commands Valeria to withdraw her team immediately. All research and investigation were to be suspended. Agents would seal off the area, and a quarantine would begin. Meanwhile, James Braddock arrives at the Shield, a colossal wall that divides the most dangerous territories of the planet. He remarks that it is a fine place to die. The young Thor recalls seeing Braddock once in Avalon, imagining him to be almost a god. James replies that now the boy would witness his fall. Braddock dons his armor. The elder Thor tells him the time has come and asks if he has any final words. James turns to the young Thor, saying this should serve as a lesson to him. There are no great men free of reproach. There is only the God Emperor and his will. Then, Captain Britain leaps from the wall, armed and ready, plunging into the wasteland below, a vast, endless land shrouded in darkness. This was the Southern Deadlands. Upon landing, James hears voices whispering that fresh meat had arrived. He lights the sword in his hand, revealing Venom, who declares that he will share Braddock's flesh with the others, but the brain would be his. Venom commanded the vast army of the Deadlands, composed of villains exiled there, who had become nothing more than zombies. James Braddock charges forward, cleaving Venom's body and arm in half, and with a single strike, decapitates another creature. But soon he is surrounded on all sides by countless zombies, struggling to defend himself. The Great Wall known as the Shield did not only hold back the undead army, it also contained the Annihilation Horde, a swarm of insectoid beings led by Annihilus, commander of New Xander, another realm sealed by the Shield, neighboring the Deadlands. And beyond even that, the Shield held back the greatest threat of all, the artificial intelligence known as Ultron, machines capable of self-evolution and self-replication, expanding their numbers endlessly, always pressing against the barriers of containment. The elder Thor explains all of this to the young recruit. For generations, the Thor Corps had defended the Shield, losing many soldiers in its protection. The two Thors return to Doom's castle and report to Doctor Strange that Braddock had fallen. The sheriff declares that this was the will of God, and thus could not be questioned. The elder Thor asks if they are finally dismissed, for after such a day, they long to return to their barracks and drink mead. But Strange denies them rest. There was still one more task to be done, a grave problem of disbelief that had to be contained. And for this, the sheriff required the hand of someone experienced. The elder Thor asks if this was related to AIM, known in this universe as Advanced Idea Mythologies, a faction that spread conspiracies and false mythologies across the land. Strange responds that this had nothing to do with AIM. This was no matter of philosophy, It was something real, something tangible. They had discovered an object that must be quarantined before it could be studied. The two Thors travel to the realm of Utopolis and approach the mysterious vessel. The young recruit asks why such an object needed to be quarantined. The elder Thor explains, "Children fear monsters, men fear death, and gods fear the loss of their believers." They had to keep this secret because that object could spark doubt, could contradict the divinity of Dr. Doom. The old Thor orders that no one touch the ship. The young Thor questions whether the things that contradicted Doom's divinity might be real, but the elder replies that it does not matter. What mattered was protecting the order of that world and ensuring nothing threatened the reign of the god Emperor Doom. Yet one of the Moloids, curious beyond reason, draws near. Desperate to touch the vessel, he reaches out. The elder Thor commands him to stop immediately, but a blinding light engulfs the area and the ship bursts open. The elder Thor is struck with horror and shouts for everyone to fall back. The young recruit asks what he saw. Desperate, the old Thor screams for them all to flee. Suddenly, he is pierced through by a spear. With his final breath, he tells the others to warn the sheriff that what they had found inside that ship was death itself. He orders the novice to take to the skies and escape. Thor raises Mjolnir to fight, but before he can strike, a great axe slams into his chest. Another spear pierces through his head. The elder Thor falls dead. This was no ordinary vessel. It was a lifeboat, built at the very end of the multiverse by the Maker, just as another had been built by Reed Richards of Earth 616. But this one carried the members of the Cabal, the Dark Illuminati. From its depths emerge Proxima Midnight and Corvus Glaive of Earth 616, once generals of Thanos' Black Order, alongside Terex, the former Herald of Galactus, and then Thanos himself. With him, Namor, Maximus Boltagon, the brother of Black Bolt, the Inhuman King, the Maker, and the Black Swan. As they step into this new world, Thanos demands to know where they are. Maximus, also from Earth 616, replies that this is no world of their native galaxy. The Maker responds that, whatever this place was, they were alive, so the design they had stolen from Reed Richards had worked. But even so, his instruments reveal something strange about this world's very fabric. Proxima Midnight seizes one of the Moloids trying to flee and drags it before Thanos. The Mad Titan grips the creature by the throat and demands to know where they are. The Moloid answers, "This is the world of God Doom, that Victor Von Doom himself had created all of existence with his own hands." Thanos snarls that he does not care who forged this place. He wants its name. And the Moloid, choking for breath, reveals the truth. To the Supreme King, it was called Latverian. To the faithful, it was known as the Kingdom of God. But to the common people, it had another name. They called it Battleworld. Thus ends Chapter 2. At the beginning of the third chapter, Sheriff Strange delivers his weekly report on the events of Battleworld to Dr. Doom, the Allfather. A rare piece of good news. In the past week, there had been no incidents at the Shield. There had been a few setbacks, most notably a traveler crossing illegally between the realms, but Strange had already sent inquisitors and was awaiting more information. Doom complains that this routine of record-keeping and minor transgressions that Strange insists upon every week is trivial, unworthy of his concern. Strange replies that, though Doom is omnipotent, he is not omniscient. The greatest danger to this world, the last world in existence, comes from what is unknown. Doom must be kept informed of every event, so that no threat to his throne goes unnoticed. Victor Von Doom answers that this world is like any other world of the past, a reality full of dangers, and the two of them would face whatever came, as they always had, together. Strange remarks that Doom is in a foul mood. The God Emperor then notices that the Sheriff himself seems troubled and asks what the matter is. Dr. Strange explains that, like everyone on this planet, he knows Doom is a god. But unlike the others, he also remembers everything that came before. He remembers how the two of them built this world together, salvaging what they could, creating what they could not save. Dr. Strange remembers that he himself could have been the god of this world instead of Doom. Doom reminds Steven that it was Strange who refused the mantle of godhood. Strange agrees, adding that he still has no intention of claiming such power. But he also knows how precious this reality is. That is why he fights so hard to preserve the last world in existence. Doom explains that this is precisely why he does not worry. He may not know everything, but he trusts Strange completely to keep order. It is Strange's duty to conceal what must remain hidden and to uncover what must be revealed. For that, He has the God Emperor's full confidence. Doom asks if there are any other matters truly urgent to discuss. Strange answers yes. The unknown is becoming known, and he brings grim news from Doomguard. Not long after, in the realm of Utopolis, Doctor Strange and several members of the Thor Corps investigate the site where the mysterious vessel was found. Strange discovers the body of the elder Thor, slain, and declares that this is far worse than he feared. The young Thor recruit, who had witnessed the battle, insists that he clearly saw who emerged from the ship. Strange says he trusts the boy's eyes, but something is wrong here, and he must examine more carefully. Strange invokes his third eye, a gift from Doctor Doom, an eye that sees all. What he beholds, he says, is not of this time, nor of this world. And more than that, they are not alone. He asks the younger Thor how many foes came from the ship that killed the elder Thor. The recruit answers that he does not know the exact number, but it was not few. At that moment, Beta Ray Bill arrives, reporting that they searched the area around the ship and found 6 or 7 tracks leading south. According to the young recruit, the attack had happened 2 hours earlier. The elder Thor had been powerful, so their enemies must be strong and swift. Strange asks if they could have gotten far. Beta Ray Bill replies that it depends. If they fled on foot, perhaps 100 leagues by his estimation. If they could fly, the distance could be 4 times greater. Doctor Strange orders Beta Ray Bill to hunt down the intruders with a team of Thors. They must spread out, and it is vital that at least one of the trespassers be taken alive to the sheriff. For God will have many questions. Immediately, a squadron of Thors takes to the skies, following the trails left by the Cabal. The young Thor remains behind with the sheriff, confessing that this was his first day. None of this was supposed to happen. Strange explains that, in the past, every day was as heavy as this one. It took a long time to bring order to this world, and the cost was immense. At the Shield, countless Thors gave their lives so that others might inherit a better world. Strange then casts a spell, raising the fallen elder Thor to stand once more. He declares that, even in death, Thor is a sentinel, and now he may finally rest in peace. Then Strange calls out, shouting for whoever is still inside the ship to come forth. They are alone now. He warns the hidden figure, "Come out quickly, or he will enter himself." At last, Miles Morales steps forward, pleading for them not to attack, for he comes in peace. Strange demands to know who the others in the ship were. Spider-Man replies that he doesn't know who those people are. Miles explains that he had slipped aboard secretly to discover what the villains were plotting inside that massive dome, because there had been another world in the skies, and that was the last thing he remembered. Strange is stunned to realize that Spider-Man remembers the Incursions, the collision of worlds. He understands now. Miles remembers the world that existed before the end of the multiverse. Meanwhile, in Castle Doom, Victor and Susan Von Doom conversed. Sue explained that she had been walking through the Grand Square earlier, but was quickly interrupted by her husband. Doom warned her that she should not wander alone, for it was dangerous. She should never leave the castle without the royal escort. Sue replied that she could turn invisible, and even if she were seen, she was more than capable of handling herself. Doom agreed and asked forgiveness. He urged his wife to continue her story about the square. Susan recounted that, as she walked through the great plaza, she heard delegations from the kingdoms singing about a man who lived in the sun. She asked if Victor knew anything about it. He answered that he had never heard the song himself, but he knew of its existence. Doom asked if that was what was on her mind. Susan questioned why he had not discouraged the people from singing such a song. Victor answered that he thought she would hear the music and be pleased by it. But Susan was not pleased. She confessed that she missed him deeply. Doom replied that he knew, but her brother had challenged them. If it were up to Dr. Doom, he would have killed Johnny Storm or banished him to the Shield. But instead, he left the punishment in her hands. It was Sue herself who chose to send her brother to the heavens, so that he might bring light to a world that until then had been plunged in darkness. The Human Torch had become the very sun of Battleworld. Susan admitted that she knew her brother was a dissenter, a rebel, and she also knew that if Johnny had the chance, he would have overthrown not only Dr. Doom but herself as well. Yet she still loved him and longed to honor him somehow. Doom told her she should pay closer attention to the lyrics of the song. This was no simple tribute to her brother. Johnny Storm was now worshipped by many as a true god. To be venerated was no small matter. Sue responded that, before her brother became the sun, many believed there was no sun in that world at all, because Doom would not allow anything to shine brighter than himself in the skies of Battleworld. He admitted that the idea was offensive, and yet true. And truth, he said, could cut like a blade. Doom reminded her that he had shared all his secrets with her. She knew he had not always been a god. He had poured all his power into shaping this world, molding it as he wished. And yet, as god of this world, he could not inspire its people. Doom began to question himself. Perhaps he was the only flaw in the perfect world he had created. Perhaps the gods of old were right. He should disappear. Maybe his very presence among mortals was what prevented him from truly inspiring his worshippers. It was easier to be adored unseen. His presence made many see the God Emperor as nothing more than another man. Susan disagreed, but Doom pressed on, confessing that he was a flawed god, that not even all his power could repair his face. Susan told him it mattered not. She loved him for his mind and his heart, not his appearance. She had fallen in love with all that he had done to save lives. Susan reminded him that no one knew him better than she did, and that he was utterly wrong in that moment. He must never vanish. As she spoke, she removed Dr. Doom's mask. Susan Von Doom told him he should cast off the mask and show himself to the people as he truly was. Walk among them, so they might see what she saw, a god, powerful and full of love for his people. At that same time, on the secret island of Agamotto, Strange guided Miles Morales and young Thor into the hidden Sanctum Sanctorum he had built in this world. It was a safe place, where he could remember all that had been lost, far from prying eyes. The sheriff explained that Doom had created a world that, in some ways, mirrored those of the past. For example, much of a land once called Wakanda could now be found in the Northern Realms. Strange explained that he needed to use the Sanctum to understand how that ship had preserved beings from before the creation of this world. Miles then noticed another ship, identical, hidden within the Sanctum. Doctor Strange asked Thor to try opening it, just as they had opened the other. When the God of Thunder touched a part of the vessel, Spider-Man, Captain Marvel, the mighty Thor, and Peter Quill appeared before them. Quill asked if they had finally arrived, because it hardly looked like the end of the world. Miles Morales and Peter Parker recognized each other instantly. Peter demanded to know how Miles had ended up there. Captain Marvel turned to Doctor Strange, asking how any of them had arrived in this place. The last thing she remembered was the end of the world. She also remembered Strange disappearing months earlier. Carol demanded to know what in the hell was happening. Doctor Strange had no answer. He needed to know if this was the same Captain Marvel from his universe, or a variant from another. As they tried to make sense of the situation, Strange asked if they were the only survivors. Carol Danvers revealed they were not. Others remained inside the ship. Cyclops, Reed Richards, and Black Panther emerged. Strange was shocked to see Scott Summers reborn as the Phoenix. Black Panther and Strange exchanged the secret words of the Illuminati, proving to one another their true identities. Chala asked how Strange had survived the end of all things. Strange replied that it was a long story, and he marveled that they had built a ship to endure it. Chala explained that they had lost many allies, especially Reed Richards. Mr. Fantastic stood dazed, in shock, utterly broken. He confessed that had he only one more second, perhaps he could have saved them. For him, only minutes had passed, and he was still reeling from the loss of his family, the grief unbearable. Star-Lord asked what this place was. Strange answered that the truth was far more complicated than they realized. It was not only a question of where they were, but also when Strange revealed they had been asleep inside the ship for 8 long years. To simplify, he explained, everything that ever was had died. But at the very moment of death, God had forged a new world, built from the remains of the universes that had perished in the Incursions. Strange also revealed that a fragment of their reality, Earth 616, still existed within that new world, but most of it had vanished. None who lived in that world remembered the universes that had existed before its creation, except for those present in that gathering. He explained that at first, it was difficult to synchronize the history of this new world with that of the old, but with time it became easier, especially because God controlled every field of study and science. Mr. Fantastic then asked the question, who was this God? Strange answered, it was Dr. Doom. Victor Von Doom had saved them all. The heroes were struck with disbelief, shaken to their core. Black Panther asked when Doctor Strange had found their ship. Strange confessed that he had discovered it 3 years earlier and knew there was something important inside, but he needed to consider every possibility before opening it. Reed Richards lost control. Enraged, he screamed at Steven, accusing him of letting Doom rule as God over all of reality while never even opening the ship. He demanded to know what could have been so important that Strange left them buried alive within. Strange replied with cold simplicity. Doom was very good at playing the role of a god. Meanwhile, in Utopolis, the group known as the Cabal gathered around a fire. Maximus marveled at this strange world, where it was the sun that circled the planet and not the other way around. Corvus Glaive remarked that they had traveled across a vast distance, yet the desert seemed endless. By the next day, he said, they should split up to cover more ground and study this bizarre land. The Maker and Namor regretted their actions aboard the ship. They now believed they should have spared the life of the elder Thor and interrogated him to uncover answers about this world. Surely, old Thor would have known more than that yellow creature they had questioned. But Thanos disagreed. He declared there was no need to mourn lost opportunities, nor to show mercy to anyone. Black Swan, with mocking sarcasm, asked if they expected answers to fall from the sky while they sat idle. The Mad Titan replied with certainty. The information they sought would come to them. Namor demanded how he could be so sure. Thanos answered simply, because he was looking up. At that moment, countless members of the Thor Corps descended from the heavens upon the gathering of the Dark Illuminati, thus bringing Chapter 3 to its end. In the opening pages of Chapter 4, we see the Thor Corps and the Cabal locked in fierce combat. Thanos is shown battling against two Thors, narrowly dodging a crushing strike from Mjolnir. Namor, the Maker, Maximus, and the others are also seen clashing against the Asgardians. Meanwhile, Doctor Strange explains that this new world was nothing like the one before. He reveals that the multiverse was gone, and this new world was forged by Doctor Doom, piecing together the shattered remnants of broken Earths into a single place. He knew this because he had seen it with his own eyes. The purpose of that world was survival and nothing else. Strange spoke to the survivors of the ship, explaining how everything worked there. He said this was a place of trials and constant conflict. That was why the world needed a god, one who ruled with a firm hand. That was why Battleworld existed, and why Doom was its ruler, and he would wear the crown for a very long time. Carol Danvers declared that Strange sounded completely insane, and Reed Richards asked how all of this had happened. Strange said it all began when the Illuminati tried to understand why realities were vanishing at the start of the Incursions. He explained that Reed Richards' theories had been correct. There truly was someone behind it all. When he and Doom investigated further, they discovered the Beyonders. They realized they could not stop what was happening, but they could stop the Beyonders themselves. And so, they killed the Beyonders and took their power. Doctor Strange confessed he had felt what omnipotence was, but the power terrified him, and he fled from it. Doom did not. Doom chose to keep the power, and in doing so, managed to save what little could still be saved. Strange declared that Doom was now a god. The heroes could challenge him, despise him, deny his existence. It mattered not. Victor Von Doom reigned. Miles Morales asked if his entire world was gone, and Strange answered that not all of it. A portion of Miles' New York still existed in this world, just as a part of Black Panther's Wakanda remained. The world was stitched together from fragments of other worlds. This world was not ideal, but at least it existed, and that had to count for something. Now Doom was God. They could doubt him, defy him, deny him. None of it mattered. He ruled. Miles Morales fell into despair, realizing that his world, his friends, his family no longer existed. Strange explained again, not everything had vanished. A piece of Miles' New York remained, along with a fragment of Wakanda. He asked himself if that was enough. As flawed as this world was, it was real, and that meant something. Cyclops then spoke, saying he had recently adopted a new philosophy. If the world was not ideal, then what they had to do was burn it down completely and rebuild everything anew, in a way that would make it better. He declared that this was the burden that came with Doom's new power, and with his own as well. Doctor Strange tried to respond, but Mjolnir began to glow, startling the young Thor, who did not understand what it meant. Strange explained that it meant their attention was needed elsewhere. In Utopolis, one of the God of Thunder's variants had sounded the alarm to summon the others. The battle raged on, but the Thor Corps was faltering. Two had already been gravely wounded, and the others realized that if the villains scattered, many would escape before reinforcements could arrive. The Thors then decided that to win this fight, they would need the help of God himself. The Maker and Maximus, protected within an energy bubble, noticed that the Thors had begun to pray. The Thors lifted their glowing Mjolnirs to the heavens, calling upon Dr. Doom to join the battle. Thor appeared as an astral projection within Doom's castle. The god of that reality asked what was happening. Valeria explained that she had warned Doctor Strange earlier that something had been found. The sheriff had sent troops to investigate, and she suspected things were not going well. Thor admitted he believed the Thor Corps could win the battle, but something unnatural was occurring, and Doom needed to know. Doom then decided he would judge the matter with his own eyes. Doom ordered Thor to show him what he was seeing, to reveal the chaos spreading across the world. And so Doom began to witness the battle between the Thor Corps and the Cabal through Thor's eyes. Victor asked his daughter's opinion, and she said it was difficult to predict the outcome of the fight. Doom scoffed, saying all he saw were mortals battling mortals, an irritating sight, unworthy of his attention. Sue Storm replied that Doom was underestimating those men. The force fields there were strong enough to withstand repeated blows from Mjolnir. These were not ordinary mortals, and perhaps Victor should intervene. Doom dismissed the idea, saying it was unnecessary, for Stephen Strange had arrived. Doctor Strange appeared on the battlefield, accompanied by the survivors from the end of the multiverse. Doom requested a new projection from Valeria regarding the battle's outcome, and she admitted that with their arrival, the result was now more favorable, but less predictable, for there were more variables in play. Doom confessed that there was something unsettling, something familiar about this situation, as Black Panther and Namor clashed against each other. Then, Susan urged Doom to look at something that had caught her attention. They see Reed Richards in the middle of the battle. Susan says she doesn't know what it is, but there's something different about that man, something special. Doom declares that he had spent years searching every corner of that universe for a version of Mr. Fantastic, and finally, he had arrived. Doom orders Susan to call the surgeons and have them ready to treat the wounded. She asks if something is wrong, and Victor replies that now he is being forced to intervene in the battle, to step in, but he would return shortly. Victor Von Doom appears on the battlefield, facing them all. For a moment, everyone stops fighting, turning their eyes to the Emperor. Doom calls out for Richards. The Maker wonders if Doom was speaking to him and admits he didn't like that tone one bit. Maximus replies that surely it wasn't him. Mr. Fantastic answers, saying it was incredible what Doom had built there, a world where nothing should exist. It was impressive what Victor had done. Doom replies that he had achieved what Reed and his kind never could. Doom says he is a miracle worker, and if Reed was there, then perhaps Reed was one too. Mr. Fantastic answers that they built a ship and saved themselves, but Doom had used the situation to place himself upon a throne. Spider-Man sarcastically adds that everyone was so surprised. Victor Von Doom responds that he had a throne long before all of this, but now he was far above it. Thanos taunts him, saying Doom was merely playing God, so why not admit it without shame? Victor calmly answers, I am God. Then, he strikes, knocking everyone around him to the ground. Doom declares that he is powerful, but also merciful. He would grant them time to reshape their ways of thinking, their outdated perspectives. He would give them a chance to kneel before the god of that reality. At that moment, Cyclops declares that he needs no time nor mercy. He attacks Doom with fury, proclaiming that just because Doom held great power, it didn't mean that power would be his forever. Things change. They evolve. As he unleashes his assault, Cyclops declares that Doom is only a man pretending to be more than he truly is. On that planet, Doom was the past, but Cyclops was the future. Scott claimed he was more than a man. He was a mutant. He said that all the worlds now belonged to them, and that he would claim this one as his own. Before Scott could finish his words, Doom seizes him by the throat. Meanwhile, Doctor Strange begins weaving a spell, drawing the attention of Chala. Doom tells Cyclops that this so-called future he spoke of was nothing more than a dream. At the same time, Strange whispers to Black Panther to remember that moment. Victor Von Doom declares that the dream is over and snaps Cyclops' neck, killing him even with the power of the Phoenix burning inside. At that very instant, Strange completes his spell, making everyone vanish from the battlefield. Doom demands to know where he has sent them. Strange answers that he scattered them across the world, because they both knew what was about to happen. The heroes would refuse to kneel before Doom, and they would be slaughtered mercilessly by the God Emperor. Strange declares that he could not allow that to happen. Doom retorts that they both knew what the heroes would try next. It was in their nature. It was in his nature. Strange responds that these were people they knew, people from their old world, and that he had lived an entire lifetime with them. He declares that from this moment on, he would have nothing more to do with Doom. Victor commands the sheriff to return everyone immediately, but Strange refuses. He also reveals that he had not yet told Reed that Doom had stolen his entire life, his wife, his children, everything. And once Reed discovered that truth, he would dedicate every effort to tearing Doom down from his throne. Strange concludes that even with all his power, Victor Von Doom was terrified of Mr. Fantastic. And he was right to be afraid. The chapter closes with Doom losing control completely after this confrontation and brutally murdering Doctor Strange. Chapter 5 begins with the funeral of Doctor Strange. An elder Thor proclaims that before there was nothing, and from that nothing, the God Emperor Doom created everything, together with his first disciple, Stephen Strange. The only witness to the creation of all existence was the fallen leader, the Sheriff. A massive statue of Strange is raised beside one of the Molecule Man. If Valhalla was a place for the brave, then there, Doctor Strange would be a king. Among them all, Strange was the most worthy. During the ceremony, Jane Foster asks the young Thor what in the hell was going on. He orders her to stay quiet and says they will speak later. Sue tells Victor they would hold a public memorial for Strange so that all the barons of the realms and the citizens of Doomguard could pay their respects. But she also knew the sheriff had been a personal friend of Doom, so she prepared something more intimate. She asks Franklin to place a flower on Strange's statue. As he sets it down, Susan's son says he was truly sorry Stephen Strange had died. He really liked the sheriff, and when he discovered who was responsible, he would destroy them. Sue and Doom watch, astonished. Later that night, Dr. Doom stands before the statue of Doctor Strange. Valeria tells Doom that, even though she had never fully gotten along with Strange, there was no doubt he was a great man. She feels guilty for the sheriff's death because it had been she who sent him to investigate the strange vessel her team had discovered. She asks why her father has not yet sent her team after the culprits. More than that, why were they not already dead? Valeria asks who could possibly escape the judgment of God in such a situation. Doom answers, no one had escaped. Doom explains that it would not be wise for him to pursue them now. He is upset, and in such a state, he could destroy the entire world. It is better to wait and later show them what true judgment is. Valeria still cannot understand how they escaped. She needs to know everything about these people, everything that happened there, if something unexpected occurred. Doom tells her he needs her to find and capture these people, but without further questions. He asks if she can do this, and she replies yes. Valeria then departs on her mission. Victor Von Doom remains behind, beside the statue, lamenting the actions of Stephen that forced him to kill his friend. Then, Dr. Doom opens a secret passage beneath the statue of Molecule Man, descending mysterious stairs as he recalls the moment when he, Strange, and Molecule Man confronted the Beyonders. He moves toward a vast emptiness, and a voice begins to speak to him. The God Emperor Doom meets Owen Reese, the Molecule Man. Owen has sensed some disturbance in the world, and this worries Victor. He says the world seems peaceful, but everything could collapse if they are not careful. Then Owen says he is hungry and asks if Doom brought him something to eat. Victor says no, apologizes. He hadn't even thought of that. Other matters weighed on him. Molecule Man replies that if he doesn't eat soon, he will waste away to skin and bones. Doom interrupts and tells him that Stephen Strange has died. Owen asks if it was cancer or something like that, but Victor answers no. His doubt was what killed Strange. Molecule Man finds this interesting and unexpected. Strange knew everything. He was there with them when it all happened. Doom recalls that he had not been with the Beyonders at the beginning of the Incursions, only at the end, just like Doctor Strange, who arrived last. The only one who was there from the beginning was Molecule Man. Owen Reese begins to explain that, in truth, at the very beginning, not even he was there. There were only the Beyonders. Flashbacks show what happened in the past as Molecule Man tells the story. He says the Beyonders were omnipotent beings, immeasurably powerful, and more curious than cats. They created all universes, carried out countless random ideas, tested everything in every possible way, just to see how far those universes could go. Owen continues, saying the Beyonders grew bored with life and began to admire the idea of death. So, they created Molecule Man, the bomb that could end everything. Each Molecule Man was meant to destroy the universe to which he belonged. Doom says the Beyonders' mistake was making Owen Reese human, because that gave him the power of choice. Molecule Man says it was he who found Doom and brought him to confront the Beyonders. That was the choice he made. Victor and Owen knew that all the Molecule Men were programmed to explode at the same time, destroying the multiverse. So, they began began killing some of the Molecule Man variants to lessen the impact. They killed many, then built a religion, an army of Black Swans. But even that was not enough. The Beyonders' plan still seemed destined to succeed. The multiverse would end. That was why they also called Stephen Strange just before the end. As the Black Swans killed the Molecule Man variants, Strange joined the two in an attempt to lure the Beyonders into a trap. The goal: destroy them, steal their power, and keep it safe. Molecule Man's role was to preserve what could be saved, to rebuild a world from the remnants of those that had been annihilated, using the power stolen from the Beyonders. It was then that Strange refused to bear the power of the Beyonders. He could not endure such a burden, and he told Doom it was he who had to rebuild the universe. Back in the present, Dr. Doom confesses to Owen that it was he who killed Stephen Strange. Molecule Man says he had already sensed it, that Doom was radiating guilt and regret. Doom explains that, in the end, Dr. Strange's actions were turning him into a threat to the universe they had created. Owen warns that Doom is walking a dangerous path, one that could topple them all. He wonders aloud what would happen then. If Doom were defeated, the entire universe would disappear, because it is Doom who sustains it. The God Emperor departs, and Owen Reese mutters that next time, Doom should at least bring him something to eat. In the science department of Battleworld, the Future Foundation gathers. Valeria calls together all its members, including Dragon Man, Bentley 23, Minister Alexander Power, and the Psycho Man. She tells them that God himself has given them a task. All other projects are to be halted immediately. The God Emperor commands them to find a group of rebels, and this is now their absolute priority. The geniuses of the team begin to study all the energy points across the planet. Alexander Power explains that everything and everyone living on that world was made of the same type of energy, an energy that came from Dr. Doom himself. Valeria clarifies that they had studied and cataloged this energy for years, and until then, there had only ever been one being not made of Doom's essence, the Sheriff, Dr. Strange. He had been the only independent existence within that universe. Minister Powers adds that Strange's energy had spiked tremendously at the exact moment when all the rebels disappeared, so it was most likely the Sheriff himself who helped them escape. The Minister wonders if Strange could have been possessed or fallen under some kind of mind control, but Nostradamus replies that he senses something far worse. Valeria too felt the shadow of something terrible. The daughter of Dr. Doom tells the members of the Foundation that she has a plan. Meanwhile, we begin to discover where the rebels had ended up. Valeria insists that they will investigate, but any information they uncover must remain only among them. No one else can know, not even those inside Dr. Doom's own castle. As Valeria Von Doom delivers her instructions, we see Jane Foster infiltrated within the Thor Corps, Namor and Black Panther hiding within the realm of Egyptia, Captain Marvel captured by the forces of the Bar Sinister, and Black Swan lurking in the region near Dr. Doom's castle. Valeria continues, saying she wants to know what truly happened, who these people are, where they vanished to, and what they are truly capable of. At that moment, we also learn that Thanos had been transported beyond the shield, into the Deadlands, where the statues and Mjolnirs of fallen Thors lay scattered across the wastelands. Thanos admires the grim monument of this place with a smile across his face. At the same time, Valeria concludes her speech. She declares that, above all else, what she truly wants to know is what the rebels desire, and why these people make God himself tremble in fear. This is the end of Chapter 5. The 6th chapter begins 3 weeks later. Inside Dr. Doom's castle, Valeria tells the God Emperor that her news was not very good. Doom was troubled. The world was falling into complete disorder. Rebellions were rising in several kingdoms, and the Thors were growing weary. Valeria reports that the hunt for Stephen's killers had been a total failure. The only success they had was the capture of Corvus Glaive and Proxima Midnight, after the two had clashed with Baron Apocalypse a few days earlier. Apocalypse and his horsemen managed to defeat them. They were badly beaten, but Valeria was able to study their minds, at least a little. Corvus and Proxima were now imprisoned in tanks within the throne room of the God Emperor. Black Swan was also present in the castle. She explains that the two were husband and wife, the last surviving members of the Order of the Tyrant known as Thanos. Susan Von Doom asks why Doom was interrogating the woman. Victor says she was from another world, but Black Swan replies that she had already found her home, right there in the castle. Doom asks if there was anything else he should know. Black Swan answers that they were in battle, and suddenly, everyone disappeared. She found her way to the castle and assumed Corvus and Proxima had found each other, but she had no idea what had happened to the others. Susan asks if she knew who the others were. Black Swan admits she knew some, but not all. Susan orders her to tell everything, but Doom interrupts, saying it was not important who they were. All that mattered was where they were and what they were planning. Doom then asks Valeria if she had seen anything in their minds about that, but she replies that unfortunately, they had no idea what the others were doing, nor where they were. Valeria contacts the members of the Foundation. She feels Dr. Doom is lying and confesses that she's finding it harder to ignore her natural instincts. She was, involuntarily, poking her nose where it didn't belong. Alexander Power tells her their experiments are progressing. They had discovered the source of Doom's power, and it was located precisely in the place where Valeria was standing. On top of that, they had found 6 strange objects, some kind of drones. Powers explains that the drones followed a pattern, as if someone were searching for something. Valeria then wonders who was building them. Somewhere else on Battleworld, in a place called Project 42, the 2 variants of Reed Richards, the Maker and Mr. Fantastic, were working together. They were the ones creating the drones. The Maker was only interested in finding a weakness in Doom's armor to destroy him, but Mr. Fantastic argued they had to consider all possibilities. What would happen to this world if Doom were destroyed? Would it all collapse, or remain as it was? The Maker declares Mr. Fantastic's premise flawed. He reveals that Maximus Boltagon, now calling himself the Prophet and wearing a horned skull helmet, had gathered a legion of Doom deniers, and this small army was already marching toward the castle. Mr. Fantastic asks if this was yet another of the Maker's schemes, but the Maker simply says, perhaps. The two were clearly keeping secrets from each other. The Maker insists they must focus on the real problem that united them, discovering how to kill a god. But Mr. Fantastic refuses. He was not ready to consider such a possibility. The Maker mocks him, asking how this variant of himself had grown so sentimental and fragile with age. Mr. Fantastic answers that it was because he had learned to care about things beyond himself. To provoke him, the Maker projects a hologram of Doom together with Sue Storm, Franklin, and Valeria. Doom had stolen Reed Richards' family. Mr. Fantastic is shaken by the sight, but steadies himself and says their true goal was to discover how Doom had acquired such power. The Maker asks how, and Mr. Fantastic replies that he had a plan, and he had recruited the best heroes to see it through. Meanwhile, inside Doom's castle, the 2 Spider-Men, Peter Parker and Miles Morales, investigate near the statues of Doctor Strange and the Molecule Man. Peter notes that the focal point of the energy they were tracking lay directly beneath the Molecule Man statue, which made no sense. They wonder if what they seek might be buried there. Suddenly, Valeria appears, pointing out that there was a hatch at the statue's feet. She explains that she had found it earlier and asks if they too were searching for Doom's source of power. Peter is stunned. He asks if this girl was truly Valeria, but she has no idea what he means. She asks if she's supposed to know who he is. Peter replies that he's Spider-Man and asks how she knew they were searching for the source. She answers that she knew because she too was searching for it, though she had never met Peter. She snatches the device from Peter's hands, stating that the same person who built the drones her team discovered had also made this. She asks who built it, and Peter says it was Reed Richards. Valeria answers that she had never heard that name before. She tells Spider-Man to inform Reed that his work was of poor quality, then tosses the device back to him. Miles asks if she would join them. She refuses, saying she was only a child, not emotionally prepared for this, and already had a pounding headache. She didn't want to discover that her father was not the man he claimed to be. She explains where the hatch is and tells them to go without her, but first demands answers to 2 questions. First, was it true they had arrived aboard the mysterious ship? Peter confirms they had. Then, had anyone from their ship killed Stephen Strange? Peter says obviously not. Valeria nods, saying she had suspected as much. The 2 Spider-Men descend the stairs toward Owen Reese. The Molecule Man says this world would soon unravel. He could feel it. He greets them, and Peter Parker recognizes him instantly. Owen asks if they brought him something to eat. Peter admits he hadn't expected anyone to be down there. But Miles remembers he had a hamburger in his pocket and offers it to Reese. Peter is baffled. Where had Miles gotten that burger? Miles explains it was from his world, that he's a teenager and always hungry. Peter then recalls that hamburger was 8 years old. Miles panics, realizing Owen shouldn't eat it, but it was too late. The Molecule Man was already devouring it and loving every bite. Peter asks if Owen knew where Doom's source of power was. Owen simply answers. The Spider-Men were staring right at it. He himself was the source. Meanwhile, in Doom's castle, the God Emperor holds a holographic council with the Barons of the Realms. Madeline Pryor, Maestro, Mr. Sinister, and Apocalypse explain that a figure called the Prophet had raised an army. Doom asks if any of them had ties to this prophet, but all deny it, swearing eternal loyalty to the God Emperor. In Sabah, Nur explains that the prophet had already conquered both the lower and upper kingdoms, his army growing stronger by the day, and now they marched toward the castle. Apocalypse warns that ignoring this rebellion was dangerous. Doom asks what Apocalypse suggests. He replies that force must be used, that Doom was a god, and all who opposed him must die. Only those loyal to the God Emperor could live. Doom answers that the Thor Corps could handle it, but that it was beneath his best warriors to deal with such a pretender. Instead, Doom commands the barons to resolve the matter themselves, and quickly, before his patience ran out. Mr. Sinister turns and mutters to someone that this had not gone as planned. He was speaking to Carol Danvers. Captain Marvel says she had some ideas. Sinister begins making jokes, mocking possible plans, but Carol wasn't in the mood. She silences him with 2 heavy punches, and Sinister gives up his mocking tone. Nathaniel Essex then says he already knew what they had to do. Carol raises her fist for another punch, but Sinister smiles and declares it was time to play dirty, to be devious. Carol approves. Meanwhile, Black Panther and Namor travel inside a giant octopus toward the secret island of Agamotto. Namor remarks that they had crossed the ocean countless times before finding Strange's hidden refuge. He asks if the true miracle was that they had found it, or that they hadn't killed each other along the way. Chala replies that Namor was now King of Ashes, and he, King of the Dead. The reasons for their old feuds no longer mattered. Wakanda and Atlantis were gone. Black Panther says that before them stood a new world. Namor scoffs, saying it was only a door, and a locked one at that. Black Panther reminds Namor that Strange had entrusted them with the key, the Eye of Agamotto itself. They open the door and find a massive hologram of Stephen Strange's head. The head begins to speak. If they held the key, then Doctor Strange must be dead. It asks if they had taken it from him by force, or if he had given it willingly. The hologram and Chala both recite the same secret Illuminati password, proving that Strange had entrusted the eye to them freely. After hearing Chala's answer, the floating head spoke, saying it would leave with them the 2 only objects of true importance it possessed. One was called the Siege Courageous, capable of transporting them anywhere they desired. The other was geographically restricted, usable only in Doomstadt, the location of Dr. Doom's castle. Strange explained that this world had been constructed from the remnants of countless universes. In one of those worlds, Dr. Strange had gathered all the Infinity Stones. The stones could only be used in the universe from which they came. So, he had Doom build the castle precisely in that location, ensuring that they could be wielded in the future if the need arose. Black Panther took a complete gauntlet, containing all the Infinity Stones, and the hologram of Doctor Strange declared that this was the only way to defeat Doom. Back at the castle, Susan called Franklin, saying it was time for bed. She asked him how his day had been, and he said it was incredible. He and Galactus had gone fishing, and he had even caught a Leviathan. Before going to sleep, he asked his mother to tell him a story. Susan asked if there was a particular one he wanted to hear, and he said he wanted to hear the story of the Fantastic Four. Sue sighed, saying she had told it 1,000 times. But Franklin replied that he feared forgetting it over time if she stopped telling it. Sue began. Long ago, 4 people embarked on a journey together. There was her brother Johnny, their friend Ben Grimm, and her father, Dr. Franklin Storm. Something went terribly wrong, and their ship crashed. She explained that sometimes, failure is only the first step toward an incredible, unexpected adventure. With the crash, the 4 changed. They gained powers. Together, they became heroes and protected Earth for years. One day, their world ended, but from its ashes, a new world was born, the one they now inhabited. It was then that she met Franklin's father, Victor Von Doom, the man who saved them all. She recounted that in the beginning, this new world had been terrifying, a place of endless night and war. It was during that time that her father, Franklin, had died, killed in one of those wars by Apocalypse. Then Doom appeared and rebuilt everything from scratch. He created the world anew and brought peace. On that day, the Fantastic Four perished, making way for something greater. Johnny Storm even became the sun, to lessen the darkness and night in that realm. Franklin asked what had happened to Uncle Ben Grimm, a part of the story his mother had never told. Sue said that was a tale for another day. When he was older, in the Shield, Thanos sat listening as the Thing recounted his story. He had left his own family behind. Ben Grimm had been transformed into the Shield itself by Doom, becoming the wall that separated the world from the nightmares beyond that fortress. The Thing explained that he had sacrificed everything for the peace of that universe. But now, the Mad Titan spoke as though it had all been in vain. Thanos replied that what the Thing said was nonsense. The God Emperor had placed him there out of fear, just as he had feared Johnny Storm, banishing him to become the Sun. Thanos revealed that he knew a secret. The Mad Titan said he knew who Ben Grimm truly was. A warrior, a hero. In Thanos' world, the Thing was the best friend of Dr. Doom's greatest enemy, Reed Richards. Together, Ben Grimm and Reed Richards had defeated Victor countless times. Doom was a usurper of power. Thanos admitted he had felt the entire universe twist within his clenched fist, and by experience, he knew that such power could never be entrusted to a mere mortal. The Thing asked if none of it was real. Thanos said that everything there was entirely real, only it was not reality as it should be. Doom had convinced the entire world to live on its knees every day. He had lied to everyone, and that was a truth difficult to swallow. But Thanos had one final question for Ben Grimm. Would the Thing simply die there, or would he rise and fight? The 6th chapter ended with the image of a gigantic Thing, finally rising, shattering a vast portion of the shield. The 7th chapter of this saga begins with the Prophet leading the army he had gathered toward Dr. Doom's castle. He spoke to the people of freedom, and they prepared for battle. Doom was not a god and had to be removed from his throne. The people could no longer suffer at his hands. Yet one question lingered over all who followed him. Who was this prophet? Maximus Boltagon removed his mask, revealing himself. He declared that all those present had followed him to the very end of all existence. It was inevitable, but it would be immensely fun. The battle had begun. The prophet's army clashed against countless variants of Mr. Sinister and against the goblins of Baroness Madeline Pryor. Dr. Doom's armies had also gathered to repel the rebels and the prophet's soldiers. The Black Swan offered to join those loyal to the God Emperor, but Doom refused. He feared she might be consumed by rage, just as he likely would be. Therefore, he decreed that they would both watch everything from afar. Sue told Victor not to worry. Free people always rebel when faced with authority, but she was certain it would end as it had before. Valeria corrected her mother. This time was different. This time, something more was at play. Doom agreed with his daughter and ordered the Thor Corps to be summoned. On the battlefield, Maximus spoke to his followers, proclaiming that escape was impossible. All must embrace the end of everything. In that moment, he was struck down, torn apart by the hordes of Baroness Pryor's goblins. Meanwhile, Carol Danvers and numerous clones of Mr. Sinister observed the chaos from the midst of the war. They realized that the Prophet's army was in trouble. Captain Marvel commanded the main Sinister to alert all his clones who were switching sides in the battle. The goblins noticed that Sinister's army was attacking their allies, and Madeline Pryor was baffled. She was struck by Captain Marvel and fell at the feet of Nathaniel Essex. Madeline said that Mr. Sinister had always had the heart of a traitor, but she could not understand why he chose to betray Dr. Doom at that very moment. Sinister replied that he had no heart at all, and that he had attacked her only under Captain Marvel's orders. He added that he could not tolerate the outfit the Baroness wore while she struck relentlessly. Suddenly, an explosion tore through the battlefield, knocking down Carol Danvers and Nathaniel Essex. Sinister tried to rise, but someone attacked from behind, tearing his head from his shoulders. The Apocalypse Knight, known as Holocaust, lifted Sinister's severed head, telling him that Baron Apocalypse wished to speak. Sabah Nur declared that war was the perfect place for true trials, to exalt the strong and cast down the weak. Sinister remarked that Apocalypse was late to the battle, and apparently, he was not the only one arriving behind schedule. Sinister looked up and called for Apocalypse to do the same. Doomguard, the floating castle of the Thor Corps, approached the battlefield. Inside Doom's castle, Franklin sat on the hand of Galactus, pointing to the sky. He announced that the Thors had arrived. Susan Von Doom noticed the castle's arrival, but saw no sign of the Thors outside. Within the castle's grand hall, the Thor Corps was engaged in internal conflict. The novice Thor tried to explain that Jane Foster, the newly arrived Thor, spoke the truth about Dr. Doom. He lamented that this truth had divided the group, splitting the Thor Corps in two as Mjolnirs flew, tables shattered, and the Thors clashed among themselves. Jane Foster struck down the dinosaur Thor, who had attacked the novice. Afterwards, the novice declared that he would remain in the hall, holding back the Thors still loyal to Dr. Doom. He told Jane to lead the others to the battlefield. He added that the worthy outnumbered those still faithful to Doom. Jane Foster then began a speech, declaring that all present could feel in their hearts the truth of her words. Doom was not a god. He was not benevolent. They had all been deceived. She asked who would join her in battle. While the novice stayed behind with a few Thors to defend the hall, Jane Foster soared into the air, leading an army of Thors toward the war. The Thor Corps arrived at the battlefield, striking fiercely against Doom's barons. They toppled Holocaust, assaulted Apocalypse, and tore into the goblins of Baroness Pryor. Meanwhile, Victor Von Doom's family watched in disbelief. Valeria could hardly believe her eyes, lamenting that the Thors were attacking the barons who defended the castle. Susan asked Doom why this was happening. The God Emperor answered simply, he had been betrayed once again. Meanwhile, the floating head of Mr. Sinister begged Apocalypse for mercy as he fought against the Thors. Sabah declared that he would never show mercy to Sinister. If even the mighty Apocalypse had to bow to the God Emperor, then traitors would never receive his compassion. Sinister muttered that his situation could not possibly worsen, but as he looked up, he realized it had just gotten far worse. A rusted, ancient helicarrier appeared in the sky. From its heights, Baron Maestro summoned the world-destroying Hulks, commanding them to annihilate this world. A massive horde of Emerald Goliath variants leaped from the ship into the fray, roaring in unison that it was time to crush everything in their path. Far from the battlefield, at Project 42, the secret base of the Reed Richards variants, the first stage of their plan was set into motion. The chaos unleashed by Maximus served only as a distraction for Doom's forces. Meanwhile, the Maker and Mr. Fantastic, with the help of Peter Quill, would steal the most valuable object remaining in the universe. Star-Lord would pilot the ship. Mr. Fantastic asked if Quill could manage the round trip without being detected. Quill replied, yes, probably maybe. The Maker doubted that Maximus' army could buy enough time. He asked Mr. Fantastic what the secret plan was, but Reed replied that it wasn't his plan to begin with. Then, Reed Richards contacted Chala. The Black Panther asked if everything was ready. Reed answered that they were preparing to launch immediately. He asked if Chala was ready, and the Panther said nearly, but he wanted to wait until the last moment, for what he was about to do could not easily be undone if it went wrong. They wished each other luck. Reed warned that if this failed, it would mean the absolute end of everything. Chala replied that if it came to that, they would meet on the other side, and that death was merely a different kind of journey to the land over which he ruled. Chala stood in the kingdom of Wakanda before the army of his people. Namor, at his side, remarked sarcastically that he had nearly been moved to tears by the speech. Namor and Chala used the device gifted by Doctor Strange's floating head to travel to the shield. Chala instructed Namor to stay atop a hill, guarding the portal, while he descended toward the massive wall. Namor complained about Black Panther's constant King of the Dead speeches and demanded to know what exactly lay beyond the barrier. The Black Panther exploded a large portion of the fortification, revealing what lay beyond the dead. An army of undead knelt before Chala. He told them that crossing the portal would grant them new life, a second chance, and that they would fight alongside him in the most glorious war ever known. They would confront a false god and dethrone him. Glory and honor awaited them on the other side. Yet the undead hesitated. They liked this place and were not eager for battle. Losing patience, Namor hurled his trident, impaling one of the undead. He demanded to know why they hesitated, declaring that their king awaited their answer. The undead rose, raised their arms, and shouted their readiness to fight for glory and honor. The army of the dead joined the two heroes, sealing the climax of Chapter 7 of the 2015 Secret Wars. And now we move to the penultimate chapter. The war raged at full force. The Thors, Hulks, Spider-Men, and variants of Mr. Sinister fought with unrelenting fury. Meanwhile, aboard a ship, Star-Lord reported they were 30 clicks from their intended destination. He warned they would have to pass through the battle zone and needed a more precise location of the final target. Mr. Fantastic confirmed. Their destination was Dr. Doom's castle. They were almost there when suddenly a Hulk appeared from nowhere and attacked the ship. Quill attempted an evasive maneuver, but the Hulk destroyed one of the engines. Without the rear propulsion, the ship began to plummet. Star-Lord shouted for Mr. Fantastic and the Maker to hold on, admitting he might fail to keep his promise that they would arrive at their destination unscathed. Atop the helicarrier, Maestro shouted to Doom that once his army finished the battle below, he would pursue the so-called God and claim the throne. At that moment, the giant thing appeared. He declared he had old scores to settle with Doom, and Maestro was in the way. Ben Grimm obliterated the helicarrier, though Maestro managed to leap from the wreckage and escape. Carol Danvers and Jane Foster realized Maestro's ship was plummeting and called for everyone to evacuate. The floating head of Mr. Sinister responded that escape was impossible. Thing hurled the helicarrier downward, causing a massive explosion. Susan asked what Ben was doing. Black Swan noticed rebels had arrived at the castle, but Doom declared it was not that. They would know if the lower levels of the castle were breached. The God Emperor ordered Black Swan to investigate, and she departed. Susan asked what Doom intended to do with Thing, but Valeria replied that apparently it was already too late. Terex the Illuminated attempted to catch Galactus' attention, explaining that in another world he had been a herald of the planet Devourer. He offered to return to his former role, pledging himself as a herald of Galactus in this universe. But Galactus crushed Terex without mercy. At the same time, Franklin controlled Galactus from within, directing the battle. Thing struck the Devourer of Worlds with a massive blow. Susan watched in horror, realizing her son was in the fray. She demanded Doom to end the chaos. Doom replied that he would resolve it, but not now. Thing was the shield. If the shield had fallen, countless creatures would emerge. Franklin taunted Ben Grimm, saying he would need much more if he wanted to bring down Galactus. The Thing answered that much more was already coming. All combatants suddenly stopped, their eyes drawn toward the horizon. The Annihilation Horde appeared, led by Thanos, mounted upon a strange creature. Dr. Doom teleported away, vanishing from the castle. Meanwhile, the Battle of Giants continued. Galactus struck Thing with full force, and Franklin warned that now it had become truly serious. His father, Doom, had entered the battle, and he was in a terrible mood. The Thing began to piece everything together and realized that Franklin was Susan Storm's son. Upon this revelation, he decided to stop fighting. The Thing declared there would be no happy ending. In theory, they should continue battling, but it no longer felt right. Ben Grimm vowed he would never fight Susan's son, urging him to do what he must. In that instant, Galactus disintegrated the Thing completely. Susan mourned deeply the death of Ben Grimm, particularly because it had been caused by her own son. Valeria spoke, saying that this war was a spectacle, a grand show. Sue grew concerned, but Valeria asked if her mother trusted and loved her. The Invisible Woman confirmed, and Valeria said she needed to show her something. She asked her mother to follow. Meanwhile, Peter Quill worked to repair the ship. He was confronted by Black Swan, who demanded to know what he was doing. Quill explained that he was trying to fix the ship so his friends could defeat Doom and have a way to escape. Black Swan countered that she served God and would destroy all who opposed him. The two prepared to fight. Quill was thrown violently and landed on the roots of Yggdrasil, the World Tree. Black Swan approached, declaring she would finish off Star-Lord. Quill replied that if she stopped immediately, he promised not to use his wooden toothpick. Black Swan advanced, saying it was time for him to die. Quill responded with a simple, "I warned you." He drops the stick into Yggdrasil and tells her to say hello to his friend. Branches begin to grow from the tree, and Black Swan demands to know what the hell was happening. Quill tells her to wait a moment, and the tree begins to speak. Groot is reborn from the sacred tree, tearing down a large part of the castle. Franklin watches in shock, realizing they were in deep trouble. The very world tree was transforming into a giant Groot. Susan notices that the battle had engulfed the entire world, and the world tree was moving away from the castle. She asks her daughter what was so important that she had to show it at this exact moment. Valeria reveals that she believed Doom had lied to them their whole lives, and soon everything would make sense. She brings her mother to the statues to reveal what their father had been hiding, but they are confronted by the two Reed Richards, searching for the trapdoor to enter the Molecule Man's hideout. Mr. Fantastic casually says, "Hi, Susan," to the Invisible Woman. Doom appears on the battlefield, annihilating the Annihilation Horde. Thanos demands that he stop. Doom asks why the Mad Titan bothered destroying the wall, the shield he had built. Victor questions if Thanos wanted to be a baron and warns that if the Titan found his faith, the God Emperor would hand over the Shadowlands of the shield to him. Thanos responds that he too had once been a god, that he had wielded the power of all the Infinity Stones. The Mad Titan continues, saying that as a god he had used that power correctly, but Doom was a mere fraud. It was Doom who should bow before Thanos. Even without the gauntlet now, Thanos remained a mighty tyrant, and that alone was enough to deal with Doom. Victor Von Doom declares that without the gauntlet, Thanos was nothing compared to him. Losing patience, he disintegrates Thanos, ripping the Mad Titan's skeleton from his body. Holding Thanos' skull in his hands, Doom tells Annihilus that he must pay penance for this indulgence. Annihilus answers obediently, anything the god wills. Doom then commands Annihilus to hunt down the heretics attacking his castle and devour them. The war rages on relentlessly. Groot stands at the heart of the chaos, facing Galactus. A blinding light appears in the middle of the battlefield. Captain Marvel wonders what is happening now. A golden portal opens on the battlefield, and even Dr. Doom looks concerned. The army of undead led by Black Panther passes through the siege courageous, shouting the words, "Glory and honor," and begins attacking everything and everyone in their path. Someone calls out Victor's name, summoning Dr. Doom. He turns, startled. Black Panther appears, wielding the Infinity Gauntlet, complete with all the Infinity Stones, accompanied by Namor, declaring that Doom's reign has ended. This is the conclusion of Chapter 8. At the beginning of the final chapter, Victor Von Doom realizes that everything happening was an elaborate plan by the heroes. He tries to convince T'Challa and Namor to join him, promising to rebuild a new Atlantis and a new Wakanda. Doom asks if T'Challa orchestrated all of this, claiming the situation reeks of manipulation. The two do not fall for the villain's lies. They call him a fraud. Victor Von Doom asks if this was the plan. T'Challa, wielding the complete Infinity Gauntlet, now intended to seize the God Emperor's power for himself. Black Panther bids farewell to Doom, closes his fist, and transforms him into a crystalline statue. Then Namor throws his trident. The trident shatters Dr. Doom, and Namor admits that it could not have been this easy. T'Challa agrees. It would not be simple. Doom says the blow hurt, and begins to reconstitute himself. The God Emperor unleashes a powerful energy blast at the two. T'Challa shields himself with the gauntlet, but Namor is not so fortunate and is knocked down. Doom and Black Panther resolve to finish this, God against God. Every warrior on the battlefield halts, watching the titanic clash. At the foot of the statue, Susan recognizes Reed Richards from the holograms of the battle and accuses him and his allies of killing Stephen Strange. Valeria admits she is unsure. Reed tells Sue that it was Victor who killed the sheriff. Even if Doom had noble intentions in building this world, it was time to restore everything to how it was meant to be. Sue asks who he really is. Mr. Fantastic responds, he is Reed Richards, the man who fixes things. While the gods fight, Mr. Fantastic and the Maker descend the staircase toward the Molecule Man. As usual, he asks if they brought something to eat. He is starving. Reed apologizes, but says there is nothing to eat here. Still, he believes he can help Owen in some way. The Maker excuses himself to Owen Reese, explaining that he has something to show Mr. Fantastic. He creates a temporal bubble containing himself and Reed, leaving the Molecule Man outside. He admits he had saved this moment just for Mr. Fantastic. Doom battles Black Panther as the Human Torch, the son of this world, watches closely. The Maker explains that the temporal bubble can regress human evolution itself. He apologizes for the betrayal, but admits Reed nearly cried when he saw Sue Storm. He could not allow such weakness. Mr. Fantastic is transformed into a monkey. The Maker scoffs. Who would want a whining god? At that moment, the Molecule Man appears behind him, declaring that he does care, and slices the Maker into pieces, saying he will eat him like a pizza. The Molecule Man tells Reed Richards to regain his composure quickly, because Doom will arrive soon. The God Emperor is finishing his fight against Black Panther. He destroys the gauntlet and beats T'Challa, saying that the King of Wakanda only tested him and led him into this moment of indulgent physical violence. Doom remains superior. Even with the complete gauntlet, Black Panther is still beneath him. Victor Von Doom is about to strike the final blow when he notices T'Challa laughing. Furious, he demands to know why. Black Panther recalls Doom's words at the beginning of the chapter and realizes it all reeks of manipulation. It was merely a distraction, buying time, and now Doom was about to lose everything, all of his meticulously structured chaos. The God Emperor drops Black Panther to the ground and immediately teleports to the statue area in the castle. He is confronted by Susan and Valeria. The Invisible Woman asks if any of this is true. Doom replies that it is complex and she must trust him. She asks if she must trust him as Stephen Strange once did. Doom apologizes and says he did everything he could. He enters the trapdoor, furious, noting that it was obvious Reed Richards would intervene. It is in his nature. Doom asks what the plan was, if he had constructed a new, powerful machine. But Reed says he went there only to convince Owen that there was a better solution than Victor for the problem. Victor Von Doom scoffs, saying Reed spent his life distracted by trivialities like ethics, order, and society. In truth, the only thing that mattered was survival. Doom claims he saved millions of lives while Reed could not even save his own family. Mr. Fantastic is enraged and asks how Doom dares speak so. Doom replies that he dares because he chooses between the life and death of millions. At that moment, Doom declares he will also decide whether Reed lives or dies. The God Emperor snaps his fingers. Nothing happens at first. Victor Von Doom asks Owen Reese what is going on. The Molecule Man asks if Doom brought him anything to eat, and Doom replies that he did not. Owen notes that this makes them equals. Their powers are now balanced, and Reese declares that this is fair. The battle begins evenly. Reed Richards taunts Doom, declaring that things would not be so easy now that Victor is no longer omnipotent. Richards wraps around Doom in combat, furious, accusing him of having stolen his family. Doom replies that he stole nothing, that they chose him. He asks why Mr. Fantastic cannot accept that he did some good. Reed counters that he is not blind. He knows Doom has done good, but Victor was so afraid of losing what he had built that he held on too tightly, losing control and perspective. Victor, enraged, accuses Reed of always thinking he was better than him. Reed responds that he is wrong. He always believed that Victor could become a better person than he was. Doom says he is certain that, at this moment, Reed believes he would have handled things far better if he were in Doom's position, with all his powers. Reed admits that he would, and even Doom knows it. But Doom declares it is time for Reed to die. Owen Reese hears their words and intervenes. The Molecule Man decides that, since both agree, omnipotence shall transfer to Mr. Fantastic. Doom, desperate, protests, this is not how it should be. But it is too late. A blinding flash erupts across the entire reality, a cataclysmic explosion that annihilates the battle world. The light washes over all survivors. Warriors vanish into the void. Black Panther removes the reality gem from the gauntlet, clutching it in his hand, trying to wield its power. The gem begins to fade, and the entire reality becomes a white void, a blinding emptiness. Then T'Challa realizes the plan has worked. He is back in Wakanda, the true Wakanda of Earth 616, in the midst of a ritual. 3 Wakandan warriors, Nkono, Hemo, and Tori, study stellar cartography maps of a solar system not of their own, with 12 planets. This trio is known as the Creators. T'Challa appears among the trees, telling the warriors that this solar system is their destination to explore its mysteries. The King of Wakanda congratulates them, declaring they are the finest of their generation. T'Challa explains that Wakanda has become the planet's leading spacefaring nation. The rewards for the Creators are the stars themselves. The 3 will journey where no human has gone before. Hemo senses microtremors, and everyone goes on high alert, though they see nothing. Black Panther tells them to look up, and when they do, they see a massive rocket. T'Challa reveals that this is the Alpha Flight, the first mission of Wakanda's new space program. 8 months later, on Earth 616, the main Marvel universe, Miles Morales is atop a New York skyscraper, gazing across the city. He recalls the events on Battleworld, when the Molecule Man thanked him for a hamburger and said he owed him one. Peter Parker appears, asking if Miles has eaten and done his homework. Miles answers yes to both. Peter asks if he wants to go take down some criminals. Miles replies enthusiastically, and the two swing across the skyline. Thus, Miles Morales becomes a permanent resident of the Earth-616 universe. As his own reality, Earth-1610 has temporarily ceased to exist after the Secret Wars. In a strange place, Valeria explains to Sue Storm what had happened. Owen Reese was the key, a catalyst of limitless power. This omnipotence had to be channeled by someone. In this case, Mr. Fantastic. Reed Richards and Owen Reese were rebuilding the multiverse with the help of Franklin Richards. As a dreamer and universal shaper, Franklin envisioned entire universes and passed his ideas to Reed, who used his omnipotent power to make these universes real. For each universe they created, they separated a fragment of the molecule man to serve as an anchor. Alongside them were all the members of the Future Foundation. Valeria was utterly enchanted by the creation of these new worlds and said that once their work was complete, each universe would need to be explored and cataloged. She returned to her work, speaking with Alexander Power, and together they began defining the structures, physical laws, and even mythologies of these new realities. Sue and Reed paused to contemplate the vast creation of the multiverse. Franklin asked his father if they were no longer superheroes. Reed explained that it didn't matter how they did good. The important thing was always to do good. The most important part was that they were doing it together as a family. For now, they were not superheroes. They were simply scientists, and Reed was no longer Mr. Fantastic. He was just Franklin's father. Sue remarked that, for those who were no longer heroes, this had been a magnificent final act. Reed mourned the absences of Ben Grimm and Johnny Storm. Sue remembered that when their ship departed, she had been certain they would die, but Reed had saved them all. Reed acknowledged that he had help, and that help had been crucial in fixing the mistakes he had misunderstood his entire life. Meanwhile, Dr. Doom appeared in his castle in Latveria. Reed continued, explaining that he had learned the difference between life and death is controlling fear. We cannot be so afraid of losing what we love that we hold on too tightly. As Reed spoke, Doom removed his mask atop the castle tower. Reed reflected that he had once believed in universal contraction and entropy in the end of all things. Doom noticed that the scars on his face had healed and began to laugh. Reed concluded his reflection, declaring that he now believed in universal expansion. He believed that life would endure, always. Everything was alive once again. And thus ends the story of Secret Wars 2015. It's worth noting that there was no reboot of the main Marvel universe after this saga, contrary to popular belief. The story of Earth-616 picked up where it left off and continued as it was, only bringing in more elements from other universes into the main one, like Miles Morales, for example. And if you want to dive into more classic Marvel story arcs in the comics, I have a playlist with all the videos from this series. Every single comic explained, just like this one, in chronological order. Just click on the playlist on the screen and watch everything in order, or pick the saga you're most interested in. Thank you for watching.